we are learning one of the Kabbalistic texts that I think has changed the world the most in terms of the number of people that learn it, the number of people that organize their lives according to it, the number of people that use this text to integrate their mind, body, and soul in the optimal way. It's a very exciting text. And we're in chapter 38 of the Tanya. So if you have the text with you, it's page 544. If you're watching in the future, there's usually a link of where you can get this text online. We just finished a section where we were talking about the importance of Kavanah, the importance of a physical mitzvah, the opposite, and that the whole point of a mitzvah is that you create what's called a dira b'tachtonim, a home in the lowest realms, a home in the physical world. And we should keep that in mind throughout this section as well, because that's the starting point, right? We talked about the physical mitzvah. When I put a coin in a tzedakah box, as I often say, that's my 1. And then my kavanah, as I'm learning now, that's a 0. And the 0 belongs after the 1. After the 1, now it turns it into 10 and 100 and 1,000. It expands it tremendously. But if I take away that first 1, now I just have a bunch of zeros, because that now it's just an inner feeling. I'm being inspired, but I haven't plugged it in. I haven't created the home to begin with that now I'm going to light up with my kavanah. So this chapter has been going through the incredible value now of adding kavanah, which means emotional oomph, both in terms of being excited to do it and being careful that this is an important thing and I want to do it right. When I add that emotional oomph to that mitzvah, now I light up that home I've created here in the physical, and I elevate it in a much more powerful way. And let's go through, for anyone that's joining us, because we went through 4 different categories. And let me share my screen here. We went through 4 different categories that the Alter Rebbe is using in this chapter to explain to us the different levels of mitzvahs and the kavanah associated with them, right? And as we said in the last 2 classes, when you do a mitzvah, when you actually create a home for God here in the physical world, in the lowest part of reality, that automatically lets you see God's essence. It's transparent. You look at a Torah in the ark behind me, you know that's what God wants. That's the Torah God gave us. And even though it's still a physical Torah, you're seeing the essence of God's will, let's call it, a very high kabbalistic level. We call it the pnimiut, the God's face it's referred to as. However, it still is in the physical world. There's not a lot of spiritual light. It might just look like a physical Torah. Someone from another tradition who doesn't know what it is would walk by and just see more physical stuff. There's no light there. To add the light, that's where a kavanah comes in. So the mitzvah reveals God's essence, but then my feelings about doing the mitzvah, that creates the light. So we likened it to looking through a door through a peephole. Okay, I see what's on the other side. I know what kind of day it is. I know who's there, but only a little bit of light can get through. It's very contracted light. If I do with more feeling, now I have a bigger space in the window, in the door. Now more light comes through. I see just as well who's on the other side. It's no more apparent to me who's there, but now I have more light coming in. Or a window, or finally the 4th level, where I'm surrounded by light, and that is the highest level of kavanah. So every mitzvah brings God's essence right transparently into the world, but the more kavanah that I add to it, now I have more light coming in, and suddenly those feelings of love and fear and awe are bringing light into the world. If you remember the 4 levels of mitzvahs that we discussed, let me get to that slide for you. So the first level corresponds to the first level of the 4 categories of beings. The first level of categories of beings, as in the world has inanimate, plant, animal, and human. The first level of inanimate objects is called domem. That's something that doesn't even move. Second level is the level of plant. So now things that grow. Third level we discussed is the level of animals. It has emotions and intelligence. It can move around, has will. And the last level is a human who speaks, medaber. These 4 levels of reality correspond to the 4 types of mitzvahs, depending on how much kavanah you put in. So the level of domem is compared to an action mitzvah done with no more intention than just knowing it's a mitzvah. Right? So if I'm used to you name it. I'm used to getting up and saying modeh ani, not modeh ani. I'm used to getting up and washing my hands, say. It's not even that. I'm used to kissing a mezuzah, right? So I walk by a mezuzah, and out of habit, I kiss the mezuzah because I know it's a mezuzah, it's a mitzvah to do. But I haven't given it any feeling. I haven't stopped. I haven't elevated my state so that I can walk into this room or this house a better person, a more integrated person. I just did it knowing it's a mitzvah. That's that first level. It is like an inanimate mitzvah, still creating a home for God, but we haven't started to bring it up the ladder of kavanah as we're learning. Second category that corresponds to plants, that is a mitzvah of speech and thought. Oh, I got a typo there. I'll try and fix that. A mitzvah of speech and thought, but also done without a high level of kavanah, just done knowing it's a mitzvah. And then the Alter Rebbe will take us to the third level, and these will be important in the following chapters, and that is a mitzvah that now has love and respect and is imbued with all this inner feeling that you can do. And yet, it's not something that I've created myself from my intellect. I haven't meditated on the depth of the mitzvah or divine concept to create my own emotions. I'm just relying on the fact that every Jew inside has feelings about God and feelings about mitzvahs, and you just tap into that. It's called the hidden love, we're calling it. And that's the level of an animal. So that's any mitzvah done with kavanah, with love and awe, but not one that I generated myself out of appreciation intellectually, but rather out of just a Jewish heart that loves doing Jewish things. And the fourth level is midaber, human, and that is the highest level of kavanah where I've used my intellect to meditate, as we've learned, on a divine concept and on the value of the mitzvah. And now I'm using those emotions that I've actually generated to power the mitzvah even higher. And that powers it to the fourth level, and we'll learn how that relates to the spiritual worlds. So it's a pretty complex model with these 4 types of creations: inanimate, plant, animal, and human, which correspond to 4 levels of kavanah: physical mitzvahs with no kavanah, physical mitzvahs with, speech and thought mitzvahs with no kavanah, and then mitzvahs with innate kavanah, and then finally mitzvahs with intellectually generated kavanah. So let me stop the share. So that's a crash course on the last 2 classes. Any questions on that before we go inside the text, and we'll finish chapter 38 today? Sorry, I lost my gallery view. So any questions here? And let me check online. Anybody that's watching, great. So let me know if you're in there. You can write your comments here. And I'm watching you guys online as well. So let's go inside. I said we're on page 544. And we're at Bechavanah Zo, so the third chunk down. Bechavanah Zo hu lomed umekayem hamitzvot v'chen bechavanah zo mitpalel umevorech. And go ahead, Sharon.
What are the first 2 words in English?
When he studies Torah.
When he studies Torah and fulfills the mitzvah, it is with this kavanah, and likewise, when he prays and recites blessings, it is with this kavanah of cleaving to God, whose greatness he has come to understand. Such kavanah. Stop.
Go ahead. Yeah, right there.
Such kavanah.
So we're talking about. Yeah, that's where you got it. So this is talking about the 4th level, and that's really what humans are. That's one of our gifts, is that we can decide what's right and wrong, and use our intellect to focus on it, such that we can create our own emotions and we can change our nature entirely. We can change our nature entirely. I can love the taste of a certain food and crave it and want it, and then I can hear from a doctor that food is bad for my heart, and I can focus on that reality and think about wanting to be there for my children in my old age, God willing, and that ultimately it's a higher good than just what tastes good to me, and I can change my diet entirely, or you name it. Humans have the capacity to focus with their intellect on abstract concepts, create new emotions, and change their nature entirely. They're not like animals that's their nature, and there you go. So that is essentially the long short path that we learned, the meditative path that we learned now about a year ago, where we do stop, clear our mind with breathing techniques, introduce a divine concept, and use that divine concept to generate emotions that now will elevate our mitzvahs, as we will learn. Hare kavanah zo al derech mashal kmo nishmat hamidaber shehu bal sechel uvechira uvedat yidaber.
Such kavanah is analogous to the soul of a human being who possesses intelligence and freedom of choice and who speaks with wisdom. For such kavanah is likewise based on intellect and choice.
So that is really what distinguishes humans from animals, and we have these categories. And sometimes people think, well, what makes an animal different from a human? It's the amount of intellect. Because animals, a lot of animals have intellect. It's easy to see. Anyone who owns a pet knows they have intellect. It's just we have more abstract, more of the intellect. We have more computing power, perhaps. We have better capability for language, or maybe just because we can speak, that elevates us. In Kabbalah, there's not a quantitative difference between animals and humans in terms of intellect. It's something entirely else, as we touched on last week. It's a qualitative difference. And it's not really degree of intellect, because if that were so, you have such a wide range of human intellect, then you might say, well, are we really all human, right? Is the brightest human being that ever lived, are they more human than I am with my intellect? And is someone endowed with a low level of intellect, are they somehow less human? The answer is no. They're all human. And what constitutes human intellect is not the quantity of intellect, but the quality that it actually has control over my nature and emotions. The quality of human intellect is that it has control over my emotions and my nature. And even if everything in my physical being is screaming, don't go into that place, it's dangerous, I can train myself to know there's a reason I need to go in, to save a life or to defend something, and I can overcome all of my nature and all of my emotions. And I can live my whole life in one way and be completely emotionally engaged in some activity. And then with my intellect, I can discover a higher truth, and I can change my emotions entirely. So it's not that humans are more intellectual than animals. It's that the quality is such that it rules our intellect, our emotions, and our nature. And you even see it metaphorically in how we're created, that we are upright and our heads are above our hearts, whereas the majority of animals, we'll leave out ostriches and giraffes, etc. The majority of animals, their head and their heart are basically on the same level. When you look at an animal, their head's there. So it's a little hint in how we're even created, that our head has been elevated above our emotions, and intellect is of a different quality. Does that make sense? Or any debate on that? No?
There is a good example of that, Cantor.
Pardon me?
There's a good example of that in the Adam and Eve story, where you have the serpent, the snake, just being a snake. The snake just operates on his own lustful interests. It's like a salmon swims upstream when it needs to. Okay. And then you have Eve, who can make a decision. So what is the difference between mankind and animals? You see it right there in that story, that she has the freedom of choice to make the decision of whether to give in to her desires or not.
Exactly. And that is the freedom. That is what free choice means.
Yeah. But it's a good example of the difference between, the quality of what you were talking about, that you have that control.
Yeah. So an animal of prey is always going to hunt and eat other animals. Right. I mean, they may have friends in the world, but when they're hungry, they'll go hunt. That's their nature. They're not going to have free choice about it. A human can decide to be vegetarian or to eat meat or to eat meat in a certain way or another way.
Yeah.
That is what gives us free choice. Not that we're so smart, but that our intellect rules our emotions and our heart
Right.
and our nature.
Right.
Such kavanah. Yeah. Umi shedato ktsara leda ulehitbonen bigdulat ein sof baruch hu.
The second level of Kabbalah is that of a person whose understanding is too limited to know and to reflect on the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof.
So now going down from the level of medaber, which is intellectually generated kavanah, now we have another level which is still has kavanah, is still elevating mitzvahs to very high places, but it's not the long short path we learn where we're using our intellect, our Chabad, Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat. And Phyllis, don't worry about those terms if they're not familiar. Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat, our intellect to elevate the mitzvahs. Instead, we know inside each one of us is a love of God so great that we've seen throughout history just normal Jewish people who live normal Jewish lives, not spending 12 hours a day learning or dedicating themselves to some ideal. When push came to shove and someone said, the spear is at your neck and you have to bow down to this idol, they gave up their lives, seemingly for no reason. It would have been easy to just bow down and walk away, and yet they knew they couldn't separate themselves from God. Something in their soul burst into consciousness, and they knew there was no way to separate themselves from God to the point of giving up their lives. And if that love is hidden inside, we can actually use that love by remembering that love, so to speak, to get ourselves to do anything and to have enough emotions to be excited about anything. So this is the second level, which is we're going to call the ahava mesuteret, the hidden love. And if you're using your hidden love to create kavanah, now you go up to the level of chai, animal. And why is that? Because that's how animals work. Animals have an innate nature. A salmon will swim upstream, as you said, Noreen. What drives a salmon to swim upstream? Does it learn about the head of the stream and how amazing life is, and that there's spawning grounds there, and really I'd intellectually like to have children? It's a salmon. It swims upstream. It can give its whole life and its whole vitality to swim upstream and then spawn and then die. That's its nature. It doesn't have free choice. So it has amazing will, and clearly it has some kind of love and fear that cause it to swim up that stream, but not out of its own choice, not because it intellectually ruled over its own emotions, because that's its innate nature. So if we are using our innate nature as Jews, that we love and fear God to create kavanah, now we're at the level of animal. And it is a very lofty level, so we shouldn't think that's a failure, God forbid. That's an amazing thing to do. Leholid hava mibinato v'hitgalut libo v'chein hayira b'mocho ufachad Hashem b'libo.
So as to create out of his understanding a revealed love in his heart, and also awe in his mind, and dread God in his heart. His level of understanding is inadequate to create a palpable spirit emotionally.
Right, so I'm not able now to meditate until I create palpable emotions, love and awe, as we said. Instead, rak shezocher umeorer et hava hativit hamesuteret belibo. Go ahead, Maxine.
He merely recalls and arouses the natural love hidden in his heart.
So we did talk about this when we learned the short-long path. That's chapters 18 to 25. And there we talked about it as sort of a burst of adrenaline that would get me through a challenging moment. So the main technique that we learned in the Tanya of meditation is the long short path, where to become a highly functioning individual, to always think, say, and do the proper thing, the other-centered thing, I'm going to use my mind to control my heart and meditate, as we will hopefully at the end of the class today, and generate emotions that will always get me to sustain a level of conscious thought, speech, and action that are ideal, that are basically just like a tzaddik. So we call that a Beinoni. A Beinoni is that individual who on the behavioral side of thought, speech, and action is just like a tzaddik. But we also learned in the short long path in 18 to 25, there's another way, and that is if I'm doing pretty well with my long short path and I'm meditating and I have love and awe, I'm using it to control my thought, speech, and action. But you know what? Something comes up, and this is just a different challenge for me. And I think I'm gonna yell, or I'm gonna do the wrong thing, or I'm gonna hurt somebody, or I'm gonna you name it. How do I get through that? Now I have my second technique, my short long path, and that is just recalling, as you said, remembering the love that's already in me that I don't have to create. And that love is so powerful, I give up my life. So if I give my life, it's way easier. I don't have to give my life up. I just have to keep my mouth shut and not, say or yell the things that I'm thinking of saying or yelling, not do the thing that I'm really getting pushed, whatever it is. And I pull that shot of adrenaline. I get through this challenge in the right way. And then I go back to using my intellectually generated emotions. So for us, it's sort of a burst of adrenaline to get me through a rough patch. But here he's talking about just recalling and arousing the natural love hidden in the heart. So why recalling? What's that about? And it speaks to that you can use these hidden emotions in life, not even by uncovering them to the point where I'm feeling real love that you'd call, oh, I love this, or real awe where what you call like, oh, I'm really having some trepidation here to do the right thing, but just enough that I remember that I would do anything for this being or this person, whatever it is, and that gets me to do it with some feeling. So imagine there's someone you really care about, maybe a child or a grandchild, and imagine they need some favor, a lift to the airport, and the flight's at 4 a.m, right? I mean, now it's COVID, so we'd all love to get out and drive our kids to the airport. I'm sure it'd be like a nice change, but normal times, that's tough to do. And when your alarm wakes up at 2:45, and you got to get up and get yourself out the door, you're not feeling love and awe for this mitzvah that you're doing. You'd rather go back to bed. So what do? You think, oh, this is my child. I love them so much. You remember how much they mean to you. You remember that you do anything for them, that, God forbid they were in danger, you'd give up everything for them. And by remembering that gives you enough feeling that you get up out of bed and you do the thing. But it's not like a birthday party for an 8-year-old where you're just thrilled to be there and you're in love and the feelings are just flowing. It's still 3 a.m. and you're just getting yourself to do it. So that's this situation. We're just remembering, we're recalling this hidden love. So we reveal enough of it that we start to add kavanah to our mitzvahs. We start to add some love and some awe. But like I said, because it's our innate nature, that's at the level of animal. We haven't created that feeling. That feeling was already there. Any questions about that? Let me, great, beautiful. Nice to see. Oh, thanks for all the 8 likes online and everybody that's watching. Please join the conversation. Let's go on. Motzia mehahelem vehester halev el hagiloi b'moach al kol panim.
And brings it out of concealment in his heart to a state of consciousness, in his mind at least. Even if he cannot arouse a revealed feeling of love in his heart, surely he can summon it to mental consciousness.
Oh, sorry, I saw a comment. It says, good morning. Great. This is exactly what the Alter Rebbe is saying. Even if I don't feel it in a palpable, overflowing way, I bring it to my consciousness, and I'm adding kavanah through that.
So that his will in his mind and in the recesses of his heart should approve and consent with complete willingness and perfect sincerity.
And notice we have will in our mind and we have will in our heart. And that's part of the reason why intellect can rule the heart. The quality of the will in our mind is more powerful than the quality of the will in our heart. And so it's not necessarily that my heart is overflowing with joy, but I remember this hidden love to the point where my mind and my heart say, okay, yes, let's do it. I love this. It's important to me. I want to make sure my child gets to the airport and safely and well. And now I'm elevating the mitzvah. And you can use that with any mitzvah, whether it's coming to the temple for services, reading Torah, giving charity, celebrating Purim in some way, giving somebody shalach monas. Sometimes there's a lot of work. And if you don't just love doing this particular mitzvah, that's where you pull the hidden love out and use that kind of kavanah to elevate it, as opposed to, the highest form. Limsor nafsho b'foal mamash al yichud Hashem.
There you go. Ah,
We're at,
Top of 546, right?
yeah.
To surrender his life in martyrdom, in actual fact, not merely as a figure of speech, for his affirmation of the unity of God, rejecting belief in any other divinity.
And this is the main love that we're remembering, is that every one of us, you watching, me here speaking, everyone in this Zoom, when push comes to shove, there's a point inside of us that would actually give up our lives to not be separated from God. And as we've learned in the Tanya, we've seen this again and again in history, that every Jewish person, when push comes to shove, has that capacity to say, no, I'm not gonna bow down to this thing. I'm not gonna do this thing. I'm not gonna, whatever it is, even if it means I'll lose my life. And so if I do that, how much easier would it be to just, you name it, do the correct thought, speech, and action at this moment? כדי לדווקא בו נפשו אלוקית ולבושיה ולחללן בייחודו ואחדותו.
In order to attach to him his divine soul and his garments of thought, speech, and action, and to unite them with his unity.
And if you recall, the Alter Rebbe said that is what the essence of Kavanah is. Kavanah doesn't just mean general intention. It means I'm doing this mitzvah because I love the infinite. I want to be connected to oneness. And I know this mitzvah is the channel through which I can do it. That's the channel, that's the connecting point that the infinite being created, that I can seize and now become one with the infinite. Because I'm finite, there's no way I can do it on my own. There's no amount of emotion or sincerity where I can bridge the divide between finite and infinite. It's only once the infinite has said, if you do this, now you get connected to me. And so now I know by seizing that, I can have one with God. So that really is the essence of Kavanah in Kabbalah, is that I'm learning Torah, I'm doing a mitzvah in order to create oneness where I was separate. Shehu ratzon alyon hamalubash b'talmud Torah v'kiyum hamitzvot kanizkar la'el. I think, Ruth, perhaps?
which is identical to the supernal will that is clothed in Torah study and performance of the mitzvot as explained above.
Hi, Vicky. Hi, Herb. Welcome, guys, on Facebook. So we did discuss this many times, that I feel like when I'm learning Torah, doing a mitzvah, it's just it's just me wanting to do it because I love building a sukkah. I want to spin the Gregor. I want to hear the Megillah, and that's my will. And when I'm learning Torah, what an interesting idea I'm putting in. It's my intellect that's learning it, and these are ideas in a book. But when it comes to the Ein Sof, Kabbalah says you have to flip your understanding of reality, because with the infinite, it's not divisible like a human being into components. You can't say, Albert Einstein came up with an idea, and here's his idea in a physics textbook, and this is his idea here. It's separate from Albert Einstein. With a human, that's the case. With God, with the infinite, God's intellect, God's thought is always united with God. God's will is always united with God. And so if I now am vibing, call it, with God's intellect and will, now I'm uniting with the Ein Sof as it is. I'm not just taking some piece of the Ein Sof and bringing it to my mind. That is the Ein Sof. And that's the psychological leap we have to make to really learn to flow with Judaism in a Kabbalistic way. because we're so used to separating everything into components and fragmenting it. With God, there's no fragmentation. So we kind of get in the vibe where you're doing the mitzvah to be united, and that will that you're experiencing, that's actually God's intellect, God's will. That's any thoughts on that? We talked about that many times, but it's always a challenge for me to even try and picture that in my mind. How are people on that? It's a quiet day. Have I spoken everyone into submission? How are you guys doing? All right, I'll let it go. Which is identical.
Can you
V'gam.
could you ask the question again?
I'm just wondering, are you guys up with me? Do you feel like is this computing for you guys?
Yes, but it's very deep.
It's very, very deep. Yeah.
It kind of requires you to do that going back and forth thing.
Yeah. There's a zone, right? So if you guys are in the zone, and
Yeah,
that's a good thing, that's great.
Yeah.
But if you guys are just waiting for me to stop talking, I want to make sure.
No,
didn't-
don't worry.
Okay, good.
Sometimes I get the feeling, you know how, describe your pain, when you go to a doctor, 1 to 10. How, it's like, are they putting Kavanah on this scale of 1 to 10? How do you know? Some people are more low key than others. They're not given to effusive displays, but inside, they could be off the charts.
Yes, and this is not something where I look at someone else and I say, "Oh, do they have Kavanah?" This is for me, with my nature and my way of experiencing emotions, to assess, how genuinely am I doing this? Am I really doing it with enough love and awe? And some people are naturally effusive, and some people it really is inside. And if you look at these texts, you understand that the intellectually generated love tends to be a quieter, less fiery, less effusive love to begin with. So sometimes you could be, I can think of meetings I was at where there was one in Montreal where we were at the Amidah, and I saw this man, maybe 10 years older than me, standing so still. He was like just a pole, this thin man, and nothing twitched, nothing moved. I wasn't. There was such a stillness, and it was different than the stillness that I saw in Zen meditation. It was just, there was such piety there. But he wasn't crying or kvetching or shuckling or yelling or dancing. You think of Hasidim that are davening and the energy. This is just such a quiet stillness. That actually is the quality of the level of medaber, the intellectually generated love. It tends to be much more internal. And so even the heart, the emotions are deep within the heart, and the heart is naturally feeling them. It's not on fire and spouting emotion the way it does with other emotions. So it's an excellent question, and no, we don't want to, even though we're creating categories for ourselves, we don't want to feel like, oh, I should compare one person to another, or because someone is effusive, it means that it's the higher level of love. Someone might just be very excited about what's going on today, and it might be the level of chai. Is that what you mean, Dan?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So each one of us works for ourselves, and sometimes it's a very quiet inner thing, but it's the highest level. So where are we? Someone remind me on the page. This is this natural love, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
וגם היראה כלולה בה לקבל מלכותו שלא למרור בו חס ושלום.
This natural love also comprises fear of God, acceptance of his dominion so as not to rebel against him, God forbid, through sin.
So when we engage in love, and whether it's natural or intellectually generated, but in particular the natural love, within that love is what's called a fear. Because if I love something, I fear being separated from it. I fear anything that would harm it. It just comes with it. So naturally, if I love being connected to the Ein Sof, I fear being disconnected from the Ein Sof. And when one comes, the other comes as well. And although in other traditions, fear is seen as something that's just automatically a negative, fear means attachment and we want to be detached. That's not at all the pathway in Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, if you love something in a genuine way with your sense of chesed, your soul's capacity for loving kindness, then naturally there's going to be a fear of anything that harms or gets in the way or separates you from it, and that is a good thing. And if that fear is not there, if that fear is hampered and the flow is not expressed in a balanced way, then the love is actually not complete or true. It's something else. So we really, in Kabbalah, I know many of us who've read many other cultures and spiritual pathways, there's a big sense that fear and attachment and all that stuff, and even in some cases hate, is just a complete negative. Whereas in Kabbalah, we look at the whole picture, all 10 sfirot, and love is love when there's an appropriate level of fear and respect for anything that would separate me from the concept or the being that I'm loving. ובכוונה זו הוא סור מרע ועושה טוב ולומד ומתפלל ומברך. I think we're back to Sharon. Finding your mute button, they could be hidden. There you go. Oh, you unmuted and then muted. You hit it twice, I think.
Okay, so my place is, what are the first couple words?
Bottom of 546, thinking merely.
Thinking merely of the meaning of the words.
No, you were at when motivated by the covenant.
Oh,
When-
my mistake.
When motivated by this Kavanah, which is born of his innate love and fear of God, one turns away from evil by refraining from sin and does good by observing the mitzvot and studies, prays, and recites the blessings.
Right, so all the things we do, right, when we do that out of this natural love, beferush hamilot levado belo dechilur chimu behitgalut libo umocho.
Thinking merely of the meaning of the words, excuse me, without conscious love and fear of God in his heart and mind, which would lead emotional intensity to his prayer, lacking revealed love and fear. He prays only with the meanings of the words when one fulfills the Torah in this manner.
This level of kavanah, hare kavanah zo al derech mashal kmo nishmat hachai she'eno bal sechel uvchira.
This level of kavanah is analogous to the soul of an animal, which possesses neither intelligence nor freedom of choice.
And I don't think that this is a low level. I know comparing it to the human, and it sounds like, well, it's an animal. How good is that? But this is, if we could do mitzvahs, as we'll learn, with this level, we elevate them to a very, very high spiritual status. And there's ways to even go get a free pass to the next level up. So if you can get that natural love flowing and use it to create kavanah, please do. Right? That's making the world an amazing place. וכל מידותיו שהן יראתו מדברים המזיקים אותו ואהבתו לדברים הנאהבים אצלו הן רק טבעיים אצלו ולא מבינתו ודתו.
And whose emotions, its fear of harmful things, and its love of pleasing things are merely natural to it, not a product of its intelligence or understanding.
So as we discussed, that's what an animal does. It's naturally an animal. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. And we as Jews, when we use our hidden love, that's our natural love and awe, and we do exactly what we're supposed to do with great kavanah. That's the third level we discussed, the level of chai, animal. וכך כן, על דרך משל, היראה והאהבה הטבעיות המסותרות בלב כל ישראל.
So too, by way of example, are the natural love and fear hidden in the heart of every Jew. They too are not a product of intelligence or choice.
Right, because as we learned, these are not emotions that we had to learn or generate. They actually came from, in particular, Abraham and Sarah, in terms of chesed, that Abraham was such a channel and a chariot for the divine aspect of chesed, that Abraham opened up a channel that each one of us gets a soul that has this hidden love within it. So it was there from the moment I was born, and I just have to reveal it with that simple meditation. I give it my life, so why don't I just not say this thing or not do this thing or do this thing? And boom, I can use that love by remembering it. Ki hen Yerusha lanu me'avotenu chmo teva benafshotenu kanizkar la'el.
So they are our inheritance from our patriarchs and are like a natural instinct in our souls, as mentioned above.
So that's something we got from the very first Jews, these great souls that were like chariots, and each one of us now has a soul with that love embedded in it. It's in our DNA, so to speak. So this is end of chapter 38. It's a big, important chapter. Any questions before? I'm going to do a little introduction to some of the concepts in 39, but any questions? Hi, everybody online. Hi, Nancy, Alexa. Wonderful to have you. Any questions from here? So the next two chapters, we're gonna go deeper into this concept of how we elevate mitzvahs, in particular with the emotions that we are generating or that we are uncovering. And we actually learned this when we learned the long short path. We did learn that, if you remember, it was la soto, right? That it is in your heart to do it that the emotions are created. I don't take time to explain the whole thing, but when you remember, we used our tfuna emotions, our subtle emotions, call them, to create an emotion that was strong enough just so that I would do the thing. And even if I wasn't meditating and creating palpable, powerful emotions, if I created these tvuna emotions that we mentioned, and they got me to do the thing, that meant quietly inside there was enough emotional flow that I connected my intellect to the mitzvah, and now the mitzvah is elevated to the level of intellect. So if you want to get a complete discussion of that, that was back last year when we learned the long short path. The next two chapters are going to take that dynamic and zoom in on the details of the different spiritual worlds that the mitzvahs are elevated to, and really how we can do them, so we understand the whole process. And also some shortcuts. If on Shabbat you get a little column that opens up, and even if you're only at the level of Chai, you can get it up to the level of Medaber. And if you're someone that naturally is on the level of Bria, you can get to the level of Atzilus, and that in the Amidah, there's a section, where you bow, where you're connected to Atzilus. So we're going to learn all the ins and outs of how we elevate mitzvahs. And in the end, the metaphor we're using here is one that we saw before, of a bird and its wings. That when I'm meditating, it's not so that I should end my ego. It's not so that I should be more spiritually refined, although I'm trying to be more spiritually refined. Ultimately, I'm meditating so that I can create a home for God with each mitzvah, and I can elevate that mitzvah to the highest possible level so there's as much light as I can bring into the world. And what elevates it? What elevates the body of the bird, which is the mitzvah? That's the wings of love and fear that I create. So as we go through the next chapters, keep in mind this metaphor of a bird, and that each good thing you do in the world, each productive thing you do as a Jew, and it's really a piece of the world that's come to you that is yours to elevate. It's been brought to you by divine providence. And now when you take that physical packet of reality and elevate it, it's the love and the awe that you use as Kavanah that are the wings that can elevate that mitzvah. And we'll go deep into the techniques involved there and the levels. But I want to show you, let me share my screen one more time. So we have touched on this, but for anyone that is joining us that wasn't with us, here is a map of the soul, a map of consciousness, as it flows through the four worlds that we will be discussing in the next two chapters. So I want to go through and give us a reminder or a primer for anyone who's new of what these four worlds are. So if my soul is an umbilical cord connecting my body, which is something like a spacesuit for the soul, a vehicle for the soul, and my soul is an umbilical cord coming from my body down here in time and space, It then flows upwards through 4 spiritual worlds until, as we learned, it emerges right out of the Ein Sof. Each one of our souls is an actual piece of infinity, an actual piece of God. Mamash, literally. As the Alter Rebbe said right at the beginning of the Tanya. So our soul's like an umbilical cord flowing through all these worlds. And I want you to have a basic understanding as we go through the next chapters of what the quality is of each of these worlds, because these are the places that we're able to elevate our mitzvahs up to, depending on the level of kavanah that we're using as we described. So this bottom world, asiya, is the world of action. Lasot means to do. So asiya is the world of action. This world is defined by time and time-space consciousness, my normal personality. I'm Michael. I woke up this morning. I didn't wake up in infinity, right? I woke up in a place. I didn't wake up in infinity. I'm in time and space. And time, we all flow through time together, right? The same point in time. And we all move around in space, and we can only be one point in space. So 2 things can't occupy the same space. Once you get up into the spiritual, none of that is true. None of that is true. In the spiritual, there is no space, and the only thing that separates 2 things is their spiritual level, right? That you can't say 2 things don't have the same space. And also time, it's all above time, so it's seeing all of time at once you're in the spiritual. But this, so down to the bottom here is the actual physical world, and then above that is the spiritual world of Asiya, which is the lowest level of the spiritual worlds, where physical world is being generated. So everything that we have here, this mask, is coming out of a potential in the spiritual world of Asiya that is making this into mask and keeping it as a mask. This world here, that's where all those non-kavanah elevated mitzvahs wind up. And they can be different levels in the world, as we'll learn. But if I do a mitzvah without kavanah, it's either kind of just rolling around like a marble, still kind of in the physical world, or it's moved up into the spiritual aspect of the physical world, but not above that. The second world going up is called Yitzira, and that's from the word yotzer, which means to form, So it's called the world of formation. Spiritually, this is where now created beings exist, but they don't even have spiritual material. They don't have like a spiritual quality yet of anything that can become physical substance. All they have is pure form. So if you can imagine a blueprint for a building, it's not, you don't even have the raw materials anywhere. It's just a architectural blueprint. It's just abstract, but you look at it, an architect can see this is going to become a building. Right? That's the world of Yitzira. In the umbilical cord of our soul, we experience the world of Yitzira as the world of emotion. So that's the part of our soul that's there, is the part that really is most powerful in our emotions and is most comfortable as an emotional being. This is where, if we're using the level of chai that we learned, the hidden love, and let me come back on the screen for a moment. Pause. I don't want to pause share. Never mind. I'm not going to do that. That's going to get complicated for me. So this is the level that if we're using the level of chai and we're using our innate emotions, like an animal has innate nature, we will elevate our mitzvahs to the level of Yitzira. And it's a very high spiritual level. This is the world where the majority of angels live, because as we'll learn, angels also don't have free will. They just naturally love and fear God. Above Yitzira is the level of Bria. This is a very rarefied spiritual world. Only a few rare souls are naturally at home in Bria. It's not a common thing. And the world of Bria is defined by intellect. The part of my soul that flows through Bria is most comfortable with intellect. It's me as an intellectual being. And in terms of creativity in the cosmos, Bria is where created beings begin to exist, but their only definition is that they can be created beings. So they're that abstract. It's like if you make a point on a piece of paper, now you can create a drawing, but what the drawing is, you don't even know the form of it, let alone coloring it in or adding paint. Just a sketch that starts as a point. That's the level of Bria, where everything exists as a point of pure potential. So now it's the first thing that can be a created being. It's not one with God in that it has no identity. It has identity, but not even form. It's just so abstract. And when we as you may have guessed, when we meditate with intellectually generated kavanah, because that emotion was generated by intellect, it actually belongs up in the world of intellect, and it can be elevated all the way to the world of bria. Very, very amazing thing to do a mitzvah and elevate it kabbalistically to the world of bria. As we'll learn, we get a shortcut to it on certain times, Shabbat, holidays, Rosh Chodesh. So if you know that channel is there, you can actually consciously use that conduit. Even if I'm only kind of used to elevating to this level, I can pop it up. And finally, there's the world of Atzilus. Very hard to talk about the world of Atzilus. Etzel means next to, and Atzilus also refers to emanations. So it has both those definitions. This is a world where there is no, it's not a created world. There's no created things. Because this world is just nearness and oneness to the Ein Sof, and it's just, the Sfirot exists there, and very, very, very lofty souls exist there, big tzaddikim, and they experience reality just as oneness with God. That's their home base. So whereas I wake up and I'm a physical body that wants coffee and wants to sleep more, they wake up and they're just oneness with God. So I don't know what that feels like, but you think of Moshe, you think of Sarah, you think of Rivka. Those are up there in that world of Atzilus. And there are places where we touch that, as we'll learn in the Amidah, when you bow, that self-nullification, that connects to the world of Atzilus. But it's mainly the domain of tzaddikim. So I'll stop share. So that's a little guide to the worlds that we're going to be talking about in the next two chapters. I may go over to the beginning of every class, but before we have a little, Herbert says, I'd like to know when you're having these classes. Herbert, absolutely. If you email Maya at temple-israel.org, she will send you the schedule of classes. You're most welcome to join us. It's most Thursday mornings, so we'd love to have you. Just email Maya at Temple. So let's finish with just a couple minutes of our own meditation. Make sure we're generating our own long, short path to gradually build the emotions of our soul. So if you're with us on Facebook, please find yourself in a comfortable position. Let's slow our breathing down. Let our mind come to a place of stillness. Beautiful work. And let's open our breath up to the full 4 stages of breath we've been using. So we'll breathe in, then we'll let that stay in for a moment, then we'll breathe out, then let the breath stay out. Those are the 4 stages of breath. Each one will be 4 counts long. So ready with me, and breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Let the breath stay in, 2, 3, 4. Release the breath on 1, 2, 3, 4. Remain empty, 2, 3, 4. Starting over, in, and stay there. Breath out, 2, 3, 4. Place of emptiness, 2, 3. Keep that cycle going yourself. If you like, try and focus as you breathe through your nose in this cycle on the spot underneath your nostrils and the difference in the temperature of the breath, cooler air coming in, and warmer air coming out on the exhale. Just focus on that point under your nostrils as you breathe slowly through your nose. As we naturally still the mind, as we often say, no, there's many other health benefits. Good to do this for 10, 15 minutes a day on its own. Now we'll introduce the divine element. We'll open up a Chokhmah gateway. That gateway for inspiration, that Chokhmah gateway, is the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. That space between the end of the in-breath and beginning of the out-breath, that is my wisdom gateway. Just let it naturally open up, however that works in your mind. finally, here's where we introduce a divine concept. So in Jewish meditation, the mind does not stay empty. We fill it to the brim with a divine concept, just the opposite. I want to introduce into my wisdom gateway the image of a beautiful bird. That bird is the next mitzvah you're going to do, or the mitzvah you're doing now of learning Torah. And that bird is soaring higher and higher, its wings being the love and awe that we are generating. See that image in your wisdom gateway. And if you are one of the many people watching after the fact, feel free to pause the class, return to your meditation for 10, 15 minutes. As you do, notice any positive feelings that emerge from this contemplation. Any feelings of the beauty and delicacy and importance of this mitzvah that you're elevating. This is the long, short path. Know that you are generating intellectually created emotions, which may be subtle, but can elevate a mitzvah all the way to the world of Bria, all the way to that third spiritual world. We wiggle our toes in real time and our fingers and open your eyes. Wonderful work. We're getting through some pretty chunky chapters. So if you, like I said, we're up to about really 1,000 hours a month of people learning on the various classes we have online. It's exciting. So know that even if it looks like there's just a few of us gathered here, that we're bringing in a whole community that's learning. So if you'd like to join us, please email maya@temple-israel.org. We're happy to have you come to our class. You're most welcome. Email me with questions. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks for joining us. We will see you at our next User's Guide for the Soul.
You, Cantor.
Yes.